Google Hangouts is unresponsive, so give me a second.
Okay. Can you see my screen right now?
No.
Okay.
I see you, and then in the lower right-hand corner, I see your name and then probably the screen you're talking about, but it's smaller.
So if you just click on the box that has my name on it, that will actually pull that screen up, so it's the first thing that you see.
Perfect.
It might try to flip back and forth. Google Hangouts tries to flip to whoever's talking, but you can just keep clicking on the one that says that has the image of the dashboard.
Thinking.
All right. Everybody with me?
Everybody's with you. Somebody logged in? You can go ahead and start. It may take a minute for this to come up.
Okay. Not a problem. Okay, so good morning. My name is Becca Garrison. I am Quill's Director of School Partnerships, and I'm really excited to be joining you this morning to help you guys with Quill. Now, if I understand correctly, I have until 8:30. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to keep it short and sweet. The first thing I'm going to have you all do, because we need to keep this short and sweet, is I'm going to have you go ahead and start drafting an email to me. So if you look on the side of the screen, you'll see me gradually expanding my email address there, becca@quill.org. So if you want to go ahead and start an email draft to me in the next, in another tab, what that is going to help us to do is I imagine there will be questions at the end of today, and you'll have my email so you can let me know what those questions are. So just to start us off, about how many folks have had the opportunity to use Quill before or just explore it?
Use it. We use it. Explore. We've got two of the 6.
Okay, great. So that's good. So you already have some experts in the room. Please feel free to fill in if you have any other advice or things that have worked really well for you. So the big focus for today, so we know that you have a lot of students who are close to proficiency in their narrative and argumentative writing. So we want to help those students make it to proficiency. And one of the big ways we can do that is by strengthening their sentence construction. The first thing I'm going to do is sort of introduce you to a learning path that can be a really effective way to sort of move students through the stages. We're going to talk a little bit about specific ways you can support high needs students. And then we're going to talk about how you can transfer Quill skills throughout all the subjects, because I know that literacy across the board is an important thing for you. I'm going to try to do that in about 15 minutes so that you guys have a little time to ask questions and play around while I'm there. We'll go slower if it's easier for folks to follow along that way. I'll include all of the links here later on. This first one, the bit.ly, that's going to be a link to a resource page we've been using with teachers across the country. So you'll see some of their ideas. You'll see links to demos of all of Quill's tools. And you'll have access to the main document we use to offer suggestions for tools to support students. Now, before I move any further forward, I know, Ms. Roberts, you told me already that teachers, what they were using, I can't remember off the top of my head. Are you using Google logins for Quill? I can't hear you. So let me know when you join me and I'll go over the Google logins. Otherwise, I'll keep going here. So the first thing here is the Quill path, right? So where do I go once I've got my classes created? The first thing you're going to want to do for your students is you're going to want to assign, there we go. You're going to want to assign the diagnostic. So under assign activities, you have 2 options for the entry diagnostic. Option 1 is our sentence structure diagnostic. This is for any kid who's close to grade level, who's doing a pretty decent job, who's ready to move forward. For any student who is maybe a few years below grade level, maybe is a struggling student, maybe is an English language learner, we recommend the L diagnostic. And what that does is sort of bring students back to more foundational skills that can help them to build their practice overall. So the diagnostic, the biggest difference for the L diagnostic is it will give students an option of languages. If a student is simply, sort of a learner who needs a little extra support, you can have it only show the directions in English. As it says here, the Quill diagnostic is a 22-question diagnostic about writing sentences, right? So we ask students to write 22 sentences to correct some things. And generally what that does is provides us knowledge about what specific skills students need to practice. So that diagnostic usually takes about 45 minutes or one class period. Some students will finish in 20, some will take the whole 45. It's good at that point to have some sort of next step for students, as they will be, there will be a fair number who finish early. Looks like I'm still waiting for sound here, but I'm hoping, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Great, thanks. All right, so the next stage here is what happens after the diagnostic, right? Our students have taken the diagnostic. Where do I go next? What our diagnostic does is suggest some, not all, of the activity packs that are a really great starting place for students. We know that every student, every teacher is going to use different lessons as they go, but what we want to do is start you out with the activities that will make the biggest difference. So these 7 activity packs are the ones we've determined that are the gateway to all of the skills on Quill. These are a little bit different than the ones that we assign based on student work on the L diagnostic. You'll see slightly different packs. So what that means is that students will have the opportunity to go a little bit further back when they do the L diagnostic and start with some more basic skills. The biggest difference will be between sentence combining and grammar activities. So we know that for struggling students, they need to come back to some of the fundamentals of subject-verb agreement, commonly confused words, etc. So our activity packs will start them back there. Once students get through the recommendations of both the L diagnostic and the sentence structure diagnostic, every single activity on Quill will be accessible to them. Before that point, some of them will be a struggle. So just consider that when you're considering which activities to introduce outside of the recommendations. So you'll see here underneath my sentence structure diagnostic, I've got recommendations for each of my students. I can just go ahead and assign as is, or I can select activity packs either that they aren't recommended, that I still think they should do, or unselect things because maybe I'm not quite ready to assign them that recommendation. Once I've assigned that recommendation, you can see based on this green arrow that appears, or green check mark that appears, that they're good to go. Now, in the student dashboard, what this means is that they will now be able to see these assignments in order. So each activity pack has about 5 to 8 activities in it. So that's about, do a Quill activity, we consider it about 10 to 15 minutes. If you have struggling students, you're looking more like 20 to 25 minutes as they work through and consider their answers. So just think about the timing there. So once we've assigned students activities, they can get started. These are all personalized recommendations for students, so they will each have their own learning path to work through. So those are just a few things about the diagnostic that'll be your first steps. So once you have students starting on the work, the next thing to do is to look at the reports, right? We want to see how students are doing. I'll start with a visual overview because that's a pretty simple way to make sure that your students are on track. You can see here my students have different numbers of assignments across the board. That's because of the number of activity packs that they were recommended. My blue here indicates something that's not graded. So the diagnostic we don't grade for students, so you'll see it marked in blue. The other ones are the activities my students have completed so far. So you can see Charles did a really great job on his first 2 activities, but then he struggled with his 3rd activity. If I want to know more about it, I can click on the activity and learn more. Otherwise, as long as I can toggle over them just to see a quick overview of what they're doing. Now, when I speak to students about this, I use this terminology. They can see on their dashboard the colors next to each assignment they've completed. I tell them green means great, yellow means try again, and red means ask for help. Green is 80 to 100%. We consider that mastery. Yellow is 60 to 80%. This means oftentimes students just need to give it another shot and read through the hints carefully, and they can get to that mastery level. Red usually suggests, it's lower than 60%. It usually suggests a more fundamental misunderstanding of the concept. And there it can be helpful to have students say, I need your help. Open up the activity, and you can walk through the first question with them to help support them with understanding the skill better. One of the things that we do at Quill is we will never unassign an activity to a student that they've already started. We want to make sure that students have the opportunity to try and try again. The more opportunities they have to practice, the better off they will be. So this is your first place to look at reports and see how students are doing. Now, if you're dealing with struggling students, there are a few ways to sort of get an idea of what they might need more help with on and beyond Quill. Under the standards report, which is part of your premium reporting, you can sort by student, and then you can select a student to learn more information about them. So you can see here by Common Core Standard, we've broken down. We can see which is proficient and how many times they've worked on that skill. When I'm looking at the students have worked on a skill once, then I have some questions for myself about whether this is an accurate reflection or if this is just a one-time deal. Once I see them working on it twice, I'm getting a really clear idea of where they are and where I need to intervene. One thing to note, we do not ever show students the grade level of the standard. The reasoning behind that is that, so notice, for example, the Common Core Standard for producing, expanding, and rearranging complete and simple compound sentences. This skill is listed as a 2nd grade skill, but we know that this is something that students all the way through 12th grade need help with. So we don't want to put students in a situation to feel like they're not where they need to be by putting that grade level in front of them. So you can see this and look at this. Students themselves will not see this. The other report that I find really, really helpful, especially when I'm working with struggling students, is the concept report. Here I can see how many sentences students have worked on where they've demonstrated that skill, right? So I can see overall here. So say, let me look here, and at this structure, you'll be able to see more details there. For some reason, they're not showing up today. We'll see that this student 14 out of 14 times has been able to master the structure. That's pretty amazing. When I look down here, I can see for let's say nouns and pronouns, the student's gotten this wrong 3 out of 7 times. So they might need a little more support with the noun and pronouns in that activity. The other thing I just want to highlight for you is spelling. We only mark spelling when it's wrong. So kids will never have anything listed as correct under spelling. That means most of the time they spell things correctly. Once I see more than 10, 15 cases of misspelling, I usually check in with students just to make sure that they're really looking and paying careful attention. So the 2 phrases I use with students, one is the red, yellow, green that I talked about. The other one is to read and write with precision. Right? And the reason for this, what we find is that students will frequently type in something and then get very frustrated because they think they've given the right answer and Quill is not marking it as correct. Usually what has happened is they have camel cased, so they've cased something weird, random in the middle of a sentence or not capitalized a proper noun. Or they've missed punctuation. And then, so what Quill does pay attention to in addition to the learning skill is spelling, capitalization, and punctuation. And the reason we do this is we find if kids are very precise in their typing, the skill transfers better when they're writing on their own, right? We all know that documents like, everything kind of auto spells things for you at this point. But the problem is that when students are sort of asked to like have all that done for them, they don't pay quite as much attention to the writing they're doing. And we want to make sure that they're really internalizing these skills. So I'm going to pause for 1 second and take a breath and see if there are any questions so far. Can I hear you yet? I don't think so. What you can do though is on your browser or on your Google Hangout screen, there is a place where you can click on chat. And if you want, you can toss in a question in the chat. So I'll peek back at that in a minute. All right, so I'm going to keep moving just to make sure we're on time, and I'll check back on that chat to see if there are any questions. The next thing here is how we support students with special needs. So the first thing we talked about was the L diagnostic. That's a great way to look at student needs. The second thing I'm going to do is refer you to a support page that is gradually growing and expanding. And let me see where that is real quick. Here we go. So extensions for modifications and differentiation. So here what you're seeing are a series of links that we put together because you guys, when you're using a Google Chrome browser, and these can often be found on other browsers, what I like to do is ask folks to use tools that apply not just to Quill, but across the board. And what that means is kids can be familiar with using them. And then also what they're using on Quill is a skill that they're supposed to transfer to the rest of their writing. So we don't want these things to be exclusive to Quill. So we have everything from tools to support dyslexic students to some tools that read aloud to students to some things that can translate for students who struggle with language. So these are a couple suggestions we have. The biggest suggestion I have when it comes to working with students on students with high needs is how many times you speak to them and the speed at which you ask them to work through lessons. For students who are struggling, completing 1 to 2 lessons a week is the maximum they should be doing. What's really important is that you're having them write down the skill, physically write down the skill in their notebook with an example that they worked through, and having them practice looking for or writing their own sentences using that skill. The computer is great. The computer does a lot of magical things, but I've been coaching ed tech for the last 4 or 5 years. And what I find makes the difference for students is taking what they've done on the computer and putting it on a writing page. So please think about Quill as an addendum to whatever you're currently doing and asking students to make sure they're applying that skill. In New York, a lot of our students have writer's notebooks. I ask students to write down the name of the skill and one example from the work they did correctly, or they can write down the master example and keep that in their notebook. And that becomes basically their proofreading checklist for when they are writing anything else. This is especially important for high needs students. That process, the physical process, can make a really big difference. So just consider that. It sounds like most of your classrooms have a mix of general education and special education students. In those cases, I would simply modify the pace of expectations for students with special needs, right? You might say that most of your students are completing 2 to 3, and then your students with special needs are completing about 1 activity a week so that they have the chance to practice and apply that skill. I'm going to check back now here to see if we have any questions. No questions. Great. Okay, so the next thing here on in our curriculum here is how we can translate Quill across the curriculum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to this document that you have access to, and I'm going to go down to sort of the other ways that we see Quill across the curriculum. So the first thing here is just a few extra skills to suggest to you. If you're dealing with students who are new, so when we talk about English language learning newcomers, those students oftentimes are not quite ready for for Quill. They don't have the vocabulary yet. They're not entirely sure what they're reading. In those cases, even though we're in no way affiliated with them, I think Duolingo for Schools is a really strong tool, because what it does is it helps students build sentences without worrying too much about the spelling of the words. They can, drag and drop, but construction and getting things in the right order is still essential. So that would sort of be my starting place for kids who are still at WIDA levels 1 and 2, and then introducing Quill once they're at levels 3 through 5. Recommend typing. If your students aren't already typing on a regular basis, Quill can be incredibly frustrating just because they're hunting and pecking and it takes twice as long. We recommend Typing Club. It's, once again, we're not affiliated, but it's a great tool and it has a strong teacher dashboard. And so they're using touch typing and students can really build that skill. In terms of what we're doing with students in other subjects, one option is simply to have that writer's notebook that translates those skills from class to class. Another option that we're looking at here in Quill is gradually building out more and more content-based learning in both social studies and science. So if I look under assign activities and I look under featured activity packs, I can find different recommendations in terms of lessons, right? So if we look under here, usually we've got these red lessons here. So we've got the Age of Exploration, we have Native Americans, and we have Causes of the American Revolution. We are building out about an extra activity pack that is content-based each month so that you can consider how you want to use that with your students. There are a couple other ways that you can integrate these things. If you're looking under exploring all activities, our proofreader passages are all reading passages based on a different topic. Some of them are a little more expository writing, but in some of these cases, you'll see more specific things, right? So I can see information about Eleanor Roosevelt. I can see information about a variety of different things that students can learn about. So for example, if I search for Gandhi, there's a passage on Gandhi. So we're building out content as we go. If there's specific content you would like to see, we really appreciate recommendations because it helps us to prioritize the content that we create. So let us know if there are other things you'd like to see there. The other thing I would say is when you are working in a social studies class, if you would like students to continue doing Quill work in your class, I strongly recommend using the proofreader. The reason this is such a powerful tool is because students actually work through it and edit for certain skills, right? So for the lower level skills, we'll underline the areas where we want students to go through and work. So this is capitalization, and students will go through and work on capitalization. In other cases, with the more challenging passages, it will ask students to read through without showing any of those things. So the, let me just show you what this looks like. So when you look through, you'll be able to see where students have made the correct changes. It'll tell them why that was the correct change, and when they haven't made corrections that need to be made. At the end of this, what I really love about our proofreader is that it will push students into a lesson where they can practice the skills where they struggled. So this is a great way to think about having students practice before they get into looking at their own writing. So say I am doing a bunch of writing today for students, or I'm proofreading my essay today. Using this activity before they get into proofreading can be a great way to get them to really focus and read with precision when they're focusing on their work. So those are sort of the big areas. I know we have about 5 minutes left. Is there anything you'd like me to expand on or share more of before we finish up our time today? Great. Okay, so the last step here is my email's back up here on the board. I will send out all this information to you afterwards. Please feel free to use my email. Also, I'm going to put in here the number. I know that you guys are having meetings throughout the course of the day. You're welcome to email me or give me a call in the office. If I don't answer, you're welcome to ask anyone who does answer the phone whatever questions you have, and they'll be happy to help you. And you can just say, I'm from Wilbanks. We had a professional development this morning. I have this question. You can always do that. It doesn't have to just be today, but I want to make sure that this is open to you so that you have the opportunity to continue to learn from the stuff that we're working on. So thank you so much. I'm going to hang out and end the live broadcast. I'll also share this broadcast with you so you have access to it if you'd like to come back and watch pieces of it later on. All right. So have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for joining me this early in the morning, and I'll see you soon.